Have you ever wondered what happens when your endless well of empathy finally dries up, and you push back against a narcissist's lies? Today, we are diving deep into the exact 5 brutal ways a pushed empath completely dismantles a narcissist's entire reality. It is not about revenge. It is about a profound psychological shift that leaves them entirely exposed. You will want to stay until the end for this. You have spent months, maybe years, absorbing their toxicity. You tried to heal them, love them, and understand their broken pieces. But then something inside you just snapped. It wasn't an explosion of anger. It was a very quiet, very cold realization. The fog lifted. You stopped seeing them as a misunderstood victim and finally saw the absolute predator standing right in front of you. That changes everything. Their greatest miscalculation was assuming your kindness was a permanent weakness. They honestly believed you would always be their emotional punching bag. Because you forgave them so many times before, they felt invincible. They never factored in the terrifying reality of an empath who has finally learned their worth. When that switch flips, the rules of engagement are instantly and permanently rewritten. Think of their life as an elaborate, fragile stage play. They are the director, desperately controlling every single narrative, ensuring they always look like the hero or the tragic victim. You were cast as the supporting character, meant to simply feed their ego. But what happens when you suddenly refuse to read your lines? The whole production grinds to a devastating, deeply embarrassing halt. Watching you shift from loving partner to stoic observer is terrifying for them to witness. When you finally stop reacting, their entire foundation begins to crack. We are going to break down exactly how you strip away their power, piece by piece, without ever raising your voice. It is a masterclass in psychological self-defense. Let's look at the first weapon you unsheath when you have finally had enough. The first brutal way you dismantle them is through radical, unwavering detachment. You completely remove the emotional baseline they exploit to survive. You stop defending your character when they accuse you of awful things. You stop crying when they hurl vicious insults at you. You just look at them with dead, empty eyes. You give them absolutely nothing to work with. The silence becomes deeply deafening. To understand why this destroys them, you must see them as a starving ghost. They cannot generate their own self-worth, so they feed entirely on your emotional reactions. Whether you are crying in pain or screaming in frustration, it is all just fuel to keep them alive. When you cut off that supply, you are starving them on a psychological level. The ghost begins to panic as it starts fading into nothing. Your second method of dismantling is becoming an unflinching mirror. For years, you absorbed their projected shame and guilt. Not anymore. Now, when they throw a tantrum or try to gaslight you, you simply reflect their exact behavior back at them with zero emotion attached. If they give you the silent treatment, you just enjoy the peace. The mirror forces them to finally look at their own hideous reflection. This absolute inability to self-reflect is their fatal flaw. When they are suddenly forced to look at their own actions without your tears distracting them, they experience psychological agony. They realize their tricks are obvious. They realize you see right through the facade. The very shame they spent their entire life running away from is now staring them right in the face, and it is unbearable for them. The third way you break their reality is through weaponized boundary enforcement. You stop explaining your limits and simply start enforcing them. When they cross a line, you do not write a long paragraph begging for respect. You just leave the room. You say a simple, flat no, without offering any justification. Removing your explanations robs them of the chance to debate, manipulate, or twist your own words. In the beginning, they will not believe this new version of you is real. They will escalate their abuse, trying to poke the bear, waiting for the tearful breakdown they have grown so accustomed to. They will throw out their most venomous insults, the ones that used to shatter you instantly. But this time, it just bounces right off. The panic in their eyes when they realize their best weapons are utterly useless. This leads to the fourth way you dismantle them: radical truth-telling. You stop keeping their dirty little secrets. When they try to spin a false narrative, you calmly state the objective facts, completely stripping away the emotion. You shatter the illusion entirely. You don't argue with their delusion, you simply refuse to participate in it. Reality becomes a blinding light they cannot possibly hide from. They will inevitably launch a desperate smear campaign against you. They will run to anyone who will listen, painting you as the villain to protect their fragile ego. But your reaction is what truly destroys them here. You simply do not care. You don't chase down the flying monkeys to defend your honor. Your absolute, unbothered silence makes them look incredibly unhinged and desperate to the outside world. Finally, the fifth way you break them is through the total, merciless withdrawal of your presence. This is not just physical distance. It is an absolute energetic vacuum. You block their numbers, ignore their emails, and erase them from your mental space. You treat them exactly like a stranger on the street. For someone who believes they are the center of the universe, being rendered entirely invisible is fatal. At this moment, the director realizes the stage play is completely over. The lead actor has walked off the stage, the lights have been cut, and the audience has gone home. There is no grand finale, no dramatic closure for them to twist into a victory. There is only a crushing, silent emptiness. They are left standing alone in the dark, desperately shouting lines to a theater that is entirely and utterly empty. The first major consequence of this collapse is internal starvation. Without your high-quality empathy to feed on, that starving ghost begins to wither. They are forced to sit alone with the chaotic, swirling void inside their own mind. The darkness they tried so hard to inject into you is now eating them alive from the inside out. It is a psychological torment they can never ever admit to, but it is always there. They will begin frantically scrambling for low-grade supply. Because you took away the premium fuel, they have to downgrade immediately. They will seek out anyone who will listen to their fake victim stories. Strangers on the internet, superficial acquaintances, or old toxic exes. It is a pathetic, desperate scramble for validation. But it never truly satisfies them the way your genuine, deep love once did. Soon, their carefully constructed public mask begins to visibly crumble. Because they are so starved and panicked by your indifference, they become reckless. They overplay their hand. People around them start noticing the inconsistencies in their stories, the unprovoked rage, and the bizarre obsession with you. The stage play falls apart because they can no longer maintain the illusion of being the good guy. A deep, lingering paranoia begins to set in for them. They realize, perhaps for the very first time, that someone out there sees them perfectly. You know their secrets. You know how small and fragile they actually are behind the arrogance. The thought that you hold this absolute truth, and that you might expose them to the world, keeps them looking over their shoulder forever. It is a prison of their own making. Ultimately, they are left with a permanent, unshakable void. They will move on to the next target, yes. They will run the exact same scam on someone else. But they will always remember the empath who finally saw through the game and walked away without a scratch. You become the one who got away, the one they could not break. And that failure will secretly haunt their fragile ego until the very end of their days. We need to reframe what you just went through. Your sheer exhaustion was not a sign of defeat. It was the messy, painful birth of your absolute power. You had to be broken down to your very core to realize that your empathy is a sacred gift, not a free resource for emotional vampires. The dismantling of their reality was simply a byproduct of you finally choosing to brutally and unapologetically protect yourself. It cost you a tremendous amount to become this cold. You had to bury the hopeful, loving part of yourself that desperately wanted them to heal. You grieved a person who never actually existed in the first place. Acknowledge that massive sacrifice right now. It was the hardest thing you have ever had to do, but putting on that armor and walking away is exactly what saved your beautiful life from total destruction. Moving forward, everything about how you interact with the world changes. You are no longer prey. You have developed an absolute immunity to their specific brand of poison. The next time you spot that familiar smirk, or hear those subtly manipulative words, you won't feel confused or drawn in. You will just feel a deep, quiet boredom. You can spot the illusion a mile away now, and you will never fall for it again. Their future is already written, and it is a tragic loop of their own design. They will keep wearing masks, running from their own shame, and destroying every good thing that ever crosses their path. They are doomed to repeat the same miserable cycle forever. But your future is a wide open canvas. You get to heal, you get to discover peace, and you get to finally rebuild your life exactly the way you want it to be. The greatest victory you will ever achieve over a narcissist is not exposing them to the world. It is not watching their life fall apart, and it is certainly not getting them to finally apologize. The ultimate triumph is reaching a point where their name simply means nothing to you anymore. You win when they realize that your utter indifference has completely erased them from your reality forever.